rock along Highway 55 north of Kashina. How did that rock, was Spirit Rock, I think was the name of it, how did that fit into the creation story of the people?
Cindy, we're gonna have to give David now. Somebody has to give him the mic.
Well, actually, well, no, it's okay. We can just have one up here and then just pass it. That'd be easier.
Yes, Steve.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Spirit Rock is a legend story of the Menominee people. And it's talks about some of the, long ago, some of the braves had a chance to talk with the Creator. And what they did was they asked for special gifts from him. And one asked for good hunting, another one asked for good fishing, gathering rice, and the last one asked, how can I live forever? And the Creator got angry and thrust his hand down and made a stone, a rock. This is what you shall be. This lasts forever. This is who you're going to be. So that's the legend of Spirit Rock. How it connects to the creation story, it doesn't. The creation story is by itself. Like I mentioned at the museum, it took place at the Menominee River thousands of years ago.
Another question. Jim.
This question is for Ron. How has the engineered wood building high-rises, is that affecting your sales, housing?
Not really. I mean, I think what we're seeing, and I'm not too much on that end of it, the lumber end of it. We focus really on the forest management end. But the last reports I heard were that it was getting more difficult for lumber. I mean, you look at, are people really putting wood floors in when they can go and purchase flooring, whatever, from Menards or wherever? Are they building these new apartment complexes? Are they using a lot of natural material wood? No. So it's becoming less desirable to be used. We're seeing that in the market, so it's not been favorable for us on that end. To answer your question, no.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Conrad from the graduate student at the University of Wisconsin, Madison. And I have a question for everybody. What are the kinds of relationships, particularly for teachers, others at other education-oriented institutions, that you all would like to see in the works or further cultivated to do the stories that you shared with us this weekend justice?
I'll start with that. A couple of weeks ago, we have liaisons in the school. It's called the Yes Youth Enrichment Program. There's still liaisons there. And this teacher said that she made a PowerPoint for her unit on Wisconsin Indians, and she sent it to the liaison, who said, there's some issues with this, who sent it to her sister, who was in our DOC program, who sent it to me. So 2 pages of suggestions I made, and out of that came, could you come to the classroom? And I thought, what's a classroom with 30 kids? I went twice, 2 days, and I had 100 kids each time. And the teachers, I would say, like, they didn't know any more than the kids did about us. So there's a lot of work we can do on that yet. In Act 31, should be taking care of that, and I'm constantly telling teachers to the Department of Public Instruction, and especially the PBS First Nations, beautiful interviews and relationships that people can, philosophy, Bertie St. Germain's philosophies and his teaching and learning is just phenomenal. So there's a lot of resources now that there weren't before. So we just keep at it.
Yeah, and I don't think much more needs to be said, but Act 31 was in place to address some of those things. And is it working? Well, it's starting, but you need more Carol Corneliuses to come into the classrooms and tell you what you need and show you what you need and speak directly to the students and to the teachers and to the faculty. When I was chair, I sat down with DPI leadership and said these same things. I'm still saying them today. So the squeaky wheel needs to get some oil and move things in a direction that works for tribal nations and help get assured that that education process is working. And I heard Bill say throughout his presentation that we need to relearn or to forget, learn lessons. And it's true. Textbooks all the way to curriculum. It all needs fixing. Or it's not dire, certainly, but especially when we're getting people like this in classrooms and getting asked to come help teach us. It's a long process, but it can work.
Others going to comment? Yeah.
I have two questions. One, how are those archaeological sites named? I'll just ask my first question first.
How were they named?
How'd they come up with the names?
I can tell you that traditionally, the person who finds a site names it. So the name of the site sometime may relate to a geographic reference point. High Cliff site, for example, site occurred at a cliff. On the other hand, working with Larry Meyer for 20 years, we get sites named 3.246 by the tree. So there really is no specialized means, but traditionally it's been the person who finds a site, fills out the Smithsonian codification form, names that site. Sometimes they're given both a field number and a common name. So there really is no plan. It's just kind of archaeological serendipity.
Okay. And my second question is, I recently read the biography on Father Bonduel, who was the Catholic missionary that was responsible for converting the Menominee people to Christianity. And I was just wondering, he was fairly successful at the time in the 40s and the 50s. And are the Menominee still Christians? Are there a lot of Christian faith here?
Well, I can tell you this much, and then I'm going to defer to let Mr. Grignon answer the question. The first time I taught a course in Menominee prehistory, I asked my class of about 20 students, how many of you consider yourselves traditional Menominees? Nobody raised their hand. Most all of them were belonging to some Christian group or another. So I think that the Jesuits swept through and baptized everybody 3 or 4 times and then went on their way. But I'm going to let Dave answer this question.
And of course, they named a city, Bonduel, after Father Bonduel.
Yeah, I read excerpts of Bonduel's book, and we've located some of the places where he was. Like, for example, the mission he had on the north shore of, or the south shore of Lake Boygan. Whatever happened to Father Bonduel, I'm not sure of how he kind of moved away from the tribe late in life. I haven't followed it up, but I'm sure others here can provide that information for you.
As far as Father Bondwell, and let me say, not all Menominees are Christians. There's traditional Menominees, there's those that believe in whatever Christian faith there is, but not all Menominees are Christians. As Father Bondwell, he did help the Menominees as far as establishing the reservation. I did find some references that he did speak for the Menominees to stay in this area. That's what help he gave to our people. As far as Christianizing, he might have did that, but throughout the years of, how would you say, Christianizing the Menominee tribe, that was done by missionaries coming through and trying to do that, of which they had some success. But there was always a contingent of Menominees that clung to the traditional ways and the language.
Remember the one map that was up here? I remember we did put where it said pagan, Zords, pagan, I don't know, something like they're pagan, and that was what, 1930s or so?
Yeah, that map was published in Keesing, 1939 is when it was prepared, 1940 that was published, yeah.
So that was still there, and I went to Shawnee High School, and during the termination period, and the Menominees were bused down to Shawnee. So I hung out with Menominees, eventually married one.
I'm so sorry.
They're great kids. But even at that point in time, my peers that were Menominee would refer to the people in Zor, but they referred to them very derogatory because they kept the language, they kept the ceremonies, they saw them as backward. That's how colonialized we get missionaries teaching us that our ways are not good. So I really, when I read those type of things like that, what I do is I have a crap detector. It was a educator, Rogers, I think it was, said we should do that with kids. We should teach them to have an internal crack detector. Well, when I'm reading those old documents like that, part of what it is I'm sifting through to see what kernels of truth or information, any acknowledgement of, my aunt says that the preacher complained because they didn't come to church on Sunday in the spring. So they were off doing maple syrup. She said, yes, our people were doing maple syrup. So that's kind of the way we have to look at some of those things today and analyze that.
Another question, Ed, just as a point of order, you have to have the mic pretty close to your mouth.
I have a question. Real quick, I'd love to hear specifically with the audience of an elementary teacher in 4th grade to share with their students how important is tribal sovereignty to the identity of the Menominee Nation?
I think you heard that today with Doug's presentation. Losing the sovereignty, abrogation of treaties was illegal, and it took their sovereignty away. And because we were doing good with our timber and sawmill, and the government saw that as part of a assimilation attempt, get that sovereignty away from them, let them go on their own. Much like relocation, much like boarding schools, just a number of things that the government had tried to do to us, and to take our sovereignty and culture and language from us. And I think we got to look at those. Like I said, the Menominees fought to get that sovereignty back, as we heard today, and I'm glad that our people did that.
Just a quick word. I look at it, I talked a little bit about it with the burning, with the fire use. We're having to explain to our youth that fire was culturally important and significant. And again, that's that strong campaign. And I don't want to bash on Smokey, but that have a big impact. You know, only we take the bear into the classrooms, and I've seen the kids, they're scared. You know, is that the right message we want to? So we want to teach them how important it was that we understand how we were burning. We were burning in a good way. We were burning. Same thing with sovereignty, with our teaching our youth of how important that is very important to the tribe.
I think it goes back to making sure it stays in our education and teaching our future generations about tribes and tribal ways. And that's a big piece of it is the sovereignty. And it doesn't start there necessarily, but definitely ends there. What president was it that couldn't find sovereignty? I don't remember which one it was, but the President of the United States asked by tribal leadership at the National Congress of American Indians what sovereignty couldn't answer. So, you need to go back to 4th grade and learn. And we don't want that to happen, in our nation. But it does, and it's happening. But again, sovereignty is leadership. It's good leadership. It's good management. It's good government. And that's what we are, government. People need to recognize us as government, as leaders, as equals, and that's a struggle. We talk about it as tribal leaders. We have to come to the table with government across the table from us all of the time and remind them that we're equals. And it doesn't stop. So I spent countless hours in Washington State across the table from federal leaders telling them we're equals. And you remember that. So it's nonstop.
Lydia has a question.
Hi, so I'm Samantha Akers and I work with middle and high school students. Something that will be happening across the state, which I spoke with a couple people about, is National History Day. Thousands of students will be deep in research, learning about the history of Wisconsin or other issues all around the world. And then they'll go to Washington, D.C. for those that excel, maybe to share their stories. I've heard some amazing stories that have been here that are very interesting and will be very valuable to share with our students. For the panel as a whole, are there any stories, any narratives that you think would be really valuable for students to really delve deeply into and elevate to the national stage?
There's a lot of them. You could sit them in a forum like this one we had today. And there were some powerful things here today. And again, that history told the proper way is really the key, and not the history that's in the textbooks. And the wrong history, that's the tool. I think it was said a number of different ways today, but we need to tell them the right story, and we need to have them be able to learn that a way that sticks, so they can tell the stories in the future as well. Because our people likely always will. We'll always tell our story. And whether people listen is the challenge. So, I don't know if I answered your question though. If someone else has a comment.
When I'm in the classroom, one of the things that always strikes me is a lot of the students are really concerned about the future, and understandably so. We've got climate change, we've got a lot of social and racial injustice, we're facing enormous environmental problems. When I look to the history of the Menominee Nation, I am filled with hope, and I think that the stories that need to be told relay of a hopeful future. So why am I hopeful? I'm hopeful because in a very rudimentary understanding of the whole system here, but from what little I do know, I know it's possible for us to provide for ourselves and all of our non-human relatives, all the plants, all the animals that are out there by looking and learning from how Menominee have done things with the forest, with agriculture, and so on. And I think that's a story that needs to be told so that people are hopeful. Menominee peoples have faced so many hardships, both politically, socially, and so on. And yet Menominee people are still here, and they're strong, and there's a story to listen to, I think. And so when we think about all the terrible things that are happening to people all over the world, and I'm thinking about young girls in Afghanistan that used to walk 10, 15, 20 miles through a war area just to learn how to read, or what's happening to both Israelis and Palestinians, or what's happening to Ukrainians, and so forth and so on. There's so much hurt that's there, and there's been so much hurt that's here, but Menominee people are still here, and they're thriving, right? And so I think telling stories that show a hopeful future for all members of the same family, we live in one home, and telling how we can bring these hopeful futures into being, those stories are here. And so I think, and I'm not the one to tell them because I'm too dumb, right? But those stories are here. So stories that will help us listen, help everyone listen, and to get these stories out, because they really are stories of hope. Yeah, and I know there's a lot of horror and tragedy. I don't mean to minimize that, but what I walk away from is the resiliency, that's here, that social and ecological resiliency. And I think more than anything else, those are the stories that people, because how can we have the world be as we want it to be without those stories of hope? And there's so many of them that are here, right? So I guess, I don't know, it's not for me, I'm not a tribal member, it's not for me to say these things, but from the outside, that's what I see. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, I just like to point out that I'm fully in accord with what Dr. Gartner says, that I started out initially 30 years ago as someone who wasn't very well received on the Menominee Reservation. But I've learned an awful lot, and I agree with Bill, that resiliency and that concern from who you are and where you live is something that cuts across the grain from very young people, like those who attend culture camp in a year, to those who matriculate at the College of the Menominee Nation. Give us a kind of a model to follow that hopefully will be smart enough to emulate. I don't know if it will be, but hopefully that's what I share with Bill.
How about a forester offering?
I just want to add, I want to tell the story. I just want to add to Dr. Overstreet. I just want to share that first time he came, Joe Dick's site, Dave, we had found stuff on that site. We were going to do some forestry. I think historic preservation is a relatively new department within the tribe, and we're all learning, right? We're all like, what are these? Take Dave out there, what are these? We don't know what they are, but we're going to stay out of here. Then Dr. Overstreet shows up on a Saturday, and they asked us to help. There was no one really to help do the work that they were going to do there. We're going to shovel test and start looking around and try and figure the site out. First day I met with Dr. Overstreet, he was there. He was there, and then we showed up, and we didn't know who he was. We didn't know who the guy standing there, standing out in the middle of the forest. And and so we started visiting, introduced ourselves. He said his name, introduced what he did, and it's like we're visiting, and a black bear walks a little ways from us, length of this room away, stops in the middle of the road, looks at both of us, and walks away. And I thought to myself, this is good. You know, this is gonna be what we're gonna learn here today, and what we're gonna learn from this site was really kind of set in motion from that, for me, for that day, talking to him. That's what occurred, and I always keep that one with me, and I shared it with him the other day when I saw him, so. Nothing to do with your question, but I just wanted to add that today at some point.
One more back there, Jim.
Go ahead.
You had a comment?
Just to add, Dr. Overstreet mentioned the Menominee Youth Culture Camp, of which we have every year. Youth 12 to 17, 30 of them at, it's called Waukau Falls in the Menominee Forest, beautiful place to have a camp. But one of the things that they do, we have a parents' night, and they have, they look back into the legends and stories that they had, and they pick one of those and they act them out. And by doing that, they work on them every day, and they work on the moral of that story or legend, and that sticks with them for the rest of their lives. And that's what we're trying to instill into these kids. And also into the Menominee High School, tribal school, they're leading into that also to have more storytelling and things of that sort, but it's going on here.
One of the things that I like to do, especially with fourth graders, is to tell them to imagine the world at one time. The whole planet, the whole world was completely populated by small villages of people with unique cultures. And every one of those cultures looks at that constellation of the Big Dipper. And every one of those cultures has a story to explain the Big Dipper. That's diversity. And then I go ahead and tell the United story of the Big Dipper. And when I was teaching at GB, this is my first year there in '92, I had a young man come up and he said, I noticed that you tell a lot of stories when you're teaching. Will they be on the exam? I was polite, I didn't back until later. But I told him, no, they won't, but what did you learn from them? So the next 2 lectures, I did lecture. I didn't any stories. And the third time, finally somebody in the class said, where's the stories? So stories are an essential way of teaching and learning, and it's a skill to tell stories, and it's also a skill to learn to hear them, and to learn from them. And like Dave says, you take that with you your whole life, because the stories explain why things are the way they are. Does that help?
Great. Jim, did you have one? Yes,
Well, that was a good segue into my time here on the mic. I just want to take a moment, and I'm going to get emotional, but I want to thank you all for sharing your knowledge and your experiences. And I'm emotional because it's people like all of you up here on the panel that I'm appreciative to know, and I admire you all and the work you've done. And I mentioned a few times that, I have pretty big shoes to fill, but I'm very appreciative that you shared what you can with all of us here today. New visitors, people here in the community, people here with the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. I'm really proud to know you all.